From Swoop, it's Take the Plunge, a podcast about how business owners decided to stop what they were doing and took the plunge to start their own businesses. We take a look at how they came to that decision and what those first crucial steps were in getting their business up and running. My name's Kieran, and I'll be your host for this episode. Here's what you can expect on today's episode.
But there's this catch-22 in music whereby in order to work in music, you need experience in music.
Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Brees, founder and CEO of Unhurd. Unheard is on a mission to create a level playing field for independent artists. They produce data-driven marketing campaigns utilizing data collecting from all social and streaming platforms. From industry-leading marketing reports through to PR, playlisting, and content creation, Unheard help local artists become global stars. Alex, you're very, very welcome. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Kieran. Thank you for that introduction. I think I couldn't have done that better myself. So yeah, I'm very well. Thank you. I'm very well.
Awesome. Well, I suppose it would be great to kind of get an insight. First of all, let us know a little bit about Unheard. But I suppose before setting up Unheard, what were you doing and why did you decide to stop that and get into starting Unheard?
Yeah, so Unheard is really a business that I launched, I guess, out of frustration. So I launched Unheard really in an attempt to bridge what's called the value gap. And that's the gap in compensation to artists from the likes of Spotify, Apple Music. And so really what I wanted to do, and my background was in analytics, so I wanted to use data to help independent artists make smarter marketing decisions, such that every penny they spend would go as far as it possibly could in their campaign. And I guess before I started, so taking this back a little bit, so my background was in the tech world. So I worked as a trading analyst for a while for a number of tech startups. And that was really fun. And that allowed me to understand the power of data and how businesses can use data to make those smart marketing decisions. Mm-hmm. And then I wanted to work at Universal Music. Like I had this goal to work in the music industry. Universal Music was kind of this like thing in the future that I could see. And I really wanted to achieve that. And so, but there's this catch-22 in music whereby in order to work in music, you need experience in music. So I launched Unheard as a side project, really just to get some experience. And that side project was a series of live events. So I hired a few venues, invited some artists to come and perform. They performed, we captured loads of content. And there I had my music industry experience, if you like.
Yep.
Combining that with my experience in tech, so the trading analyst stuff that I was doing, I managed to get myself a job at Universal Music as an insight analyst. And that was amazing. You know, you work with the top, I worked with the top 30 grossing artists across all the labels on Universal. So people like Katy Perry and Rich the Kid and Andrea Bocelli and Bastille and Lady Gaga. Really cool, really amazing experience. But I think if anything, that gave me motivation to then, you know, go on and support independent artists.
Yeah.
It kind of inspired me a little bit. And I think that's what led me to Unheard. And since 2019, which is really when the business started to kick off, we've kind of gone from strength to strength. So it's been quite a good journey.
And in terms of kind of like your kind of journey within Universal, I don't know whether you're working in like Island Records or you're working at a group level, but did you kind of get an insight into how the operation worked from a big side of things, and you're like, not sure how great this is, just going, here's like 200k, let's give it to some media buying agency, they'll slap around it on a few channels, give us some shit data, and then we'll say, yeah, okay, do that again, please? Was that kind of a bit of an eye-opening experience?
It was an eye-opening experience, yeah. And I think because I come from the startup world, where it's very iterative, very nimble, very quick, and you can have an impact quite quickly, into the corporate world, you know, I knew there would be a transition. I knew that would happen. I knew it would be slower. I knew there'd be red tape. I knew I'd have to do things in a different manner. But maybe I wasn't quite expecting to what extent that would happen. And I sat within a really amazing team led by an amazing woman called Gabby Lopez. I sat within a global insight team, and we sat over all the record labels.
Nice.
And our job was to provide insight to, you know, the top artists from those labels. And so it was amazing. But I think that those limitations, like I said, almost inspired me, you know, and gave me motivation to say, actually, wouldn't it be amazing if I could create insight and then apply that insight directly to some of my favorite artists in the world? Yeah. And then I did that. I kind of reached out to these artists that I loved just on Instagram, really, and got their email addresses from Facebook, sent them an email to say, look, this is my experience. This is what I think I can do for you. And this is what the future would look like, you know, almost like a little marketing plan. Fortunately, some of these artists came back to me and that was the birth of the business. Yeah, so it was
Awesome.
fairly organic, but I think Universal, although potentially frustrating for myself, was an inspiration to start
Yeah.
this.
And in terms of like where you were starting to see kind of insights, was it across like a mix of different channels? Like were you, I don't know if you exposure, say programmatic advertising, or was it like insights you were seeing from Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube? Like where were you getting these kind of nuggets that you felt you could use these nuances to push new talent?
So it was across kind of the full digital landscape. So from social media, so including like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, YouTube, all the way through to what are called the DSPs, so the streaming services, so Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer. And so it was from the full landscape. And really the insights, although they were kind of really simple, they were really powerful.
Mm,
Simple things like understanding what brands your audience are interested in. So
yeah.
simple brand affinity analysis, and then plugging that into your social media ads to make sure you're reaching the right people, and not just looking at people that are following these brands plus you, but people that are engaging with these brands plus following
Yeah.
you. Little things like this that you can plug directly into a social media campaign or a YouTube campaign or
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
a DSP campaign can be incredibly powerful. So it
Yeah.
wasn't necessarily game changing as such. It was really not losing the power by passing it to four or five
Mhm.
different people.
Yeah, so I suppose just connecting kind of the dots in that artist ecosystem with relevant psychological touch points because they like this, this, and this, and present it in certain ways. Yeah, makes a
Yeah.
ton of sense. So I suppose as you kind of started to see how you could shape a story around different campaigns, who was the kind of the first artist you went after, and kind of what was the pitch to them, so to speak?
Who was the first artist I went after? Good question. Um, Shay Lingo was probably one of the first artists. He's like a UK hip hop artist. And this was around social media strategy, running the right social media ads. And actually, Shay said no to that. But we did start working on an email campaign to build his email database. And
Nice.
we went down a slightly different route. And that was really kind of my first exposure to not a major artist, but an artist with a good reputation,
Yep.
who I was working directly with, and that led me on to other clients because once you can name drop that one client, who has a reputation, and there were others in there too. We managed to get a meeting really early on with an artist called Saint John, who's a big
Hmm.
US hip hop artist. And we were sending marketing reports to Saint John's team fairly regularly. And again, although it wasn't the most profitable business, it was a name that we could drop and use when we
Hmm.
were then speaking to other
Hmm.
clients, which really, really helped. And it actually feeds quite nicely into what we're doing today when, we will reach out to artists still now. We get lots of inbound inquiries, which is great. And how we typically work is we would look through an artist's data and we would look at which metrics they under index in. So as
Hmm.
opposed to saying, I've got £1,000 marketing spend, let's like spend it
Yeah.
on all these 4 or 5 different things, actually let's take that budget and work on your Spotify follower count because it
Gotcha.
under indexes or whatever it might be. Or actually you're not on enough playlists and therefore you're not reaching enough people. Let's
Yeah.
invest
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
budget here. And that's a far more effective way of doing it than spreading your budget out. And that's how we really work with clients at the moment.
Nice. And then I suppose getting back to the business element of it, as you're saying, you kind of started being very proactive yourself, reaching out to artists, kind of building it up, doing some live events. At what point in time you're like, right, see you later, Universal, I'm onto something here. Let's build something out.
Yeah. So I actually, after Universal, I took another job working for actually HMV.
Oh
So
yeah.
I went and got a job working for HMV, again in marketing and again using data to inform smart decisions. But it was at that point when I was at HMV when I thought actually there's some momentum here, there's some potential for me to take this full time.
Yeah.
I was functioning as kind of a one person agency. Revenue was growing probably 20-25% month on month, which was
Very good.
great, but I didn't have enough savings. I didn't have enough money in my bank account because I
Go
wasn't
for
great
it.
with my money, to go for it, make that jump or take the
Yeah.
plunge. Like, excuse the pun, but take the plunge. So what I needed to do was raise a bit of capital, essentially,
Yep.
to allow me to do that. So whilst I was working at HMV, I put together the pitch deck because actually what I'd found was that I was getting more and more inquiries from artists who had £100, £200 to spend. Now,
Gotcha.
as I was functioning at the time as an agency, I couldn't work with those artists. It simply wasn't enough to cover my
No,
time.
economies of scale of one plus £100 deals probably isn't the one.
Exactly. I'd be struggling and yeah, potentially be homeless if I was to continue like that. But so what I found was that actually loads of inquiries from artists with
Yep.
smaller budgets. Now I know the independent music sector is growing 30% year on year, and it has done for the last few years. Independent music now makes up 31.5% of the streaming revenue market share.
Wow.
So yeah, so it's huge and it's
That's
growing
massive.
quickly. Yeah, and of the 2 million tracks released each month, about 95% of these are from independent artists. So there's a huge ecosystem of independent artists there who all have £100, £200, £300 to spend,
Yeah, yeah,
but there isn't a robust marketing solution for them, in my opinion.
yeah,
And so we built some algorithms which essentially would crawl through an artist data and
yeah,
create a to-do list for that artist. And that would be the targeting preferences you should use for your ads, depending on the goal you
yeah.
want to achieve, the playlist you should pitch to, etc.
Awesome.
And off the back of kind of that prototype app, if you like, we went and raised some capital, and I quit my job.
Lovely. And like, did you use like equity, like SEIS type funding, or how what kind of funding did you use to kind of get you to quit? I suppose.
Yeah, SEIS. So we qualified for SEIS funding, which was great, and we're actually fundraising again now, and hopefully we'll have EIS funding available for that too. And we raised from one VC firm and three angel investors. The angels were slightly more strategic,
Yeah,
and really and truly, it's a numbers game. It's a sales game, isn't it? I think
yeah,
people are like, oh, what's the secret? How did you do that? Like, there is no secret. A good deck and reaching out to as many relevant people as possible with a nice, concise pitch.
yeah.
You'll get there if you have a robust enough proposition, I
Mm.
believe.
But also playing into your own proposition where you can show numbers and data, particularly at an early stage business, you are going to stand out so much more than a speculative thing, but where you can actually talk about hard data and numbers, that is what will definitely excite early stage funders for sure. And how have you found, as you say, you got one VC, three angels, that combination of having multiple people advising you, has that been a beneficial thing from your perspective?
Yeah, I think so. When we initially approached this, we have great advisors. I spoke to a few of the guys at Chartmetric fairly regularly before we raised, and they knew what we were doing. And
Yeah,
so I felt like we had a really strong cohort of individuals that we could lean upon before the
yeah,
fundraise. And so we were just going for money initially.
yeah,
We were looking for someone who would just give us the cash and stand off. However, I think when we went through that process and we managed to get the VC on board first, who gave the bulk of the money, we
yeah,
actually thought it would be great if we had someone who had scaled a tech company before,
yeah,
and so we managed to bring on board the VP of sales from TeamViewer, who recently exited the business, and then a couple of strategic angels as well who have connections with Warner and Spotify and things like that.
okay.
Because I think I'm still quite young, and although I suppose I can probably be quite naive, I did understand that maybe we don't have all the answers to those sorts of
And
scaling
also
business questions.
getting your foot in the door and things like that. I can't imagine when you're trying to be outbounding into some bigger artist, there's probably a pretty hefty bubble protecting them before you can infiltrate that. So anything you can do to maneuver in there is going to be pretty useful.
Yeah, and that's actually been a big piece of our puzzle and strategy this year. Because we don't have that big name who's an advisor or who's got notoriety in the industry like that. And so we are talking to some people now, Touchwood, who have great connections and have been
Yeah,
in
yeah.
really senior positions, who can open who can open those doors for us. Because really, if you have one big artist or one big name, like a Jay-Z or a Big Burke or someone like that, we
Right,
do. That's what we want. I'm gonna, I'm gonna put Biggs Burke out there now because I've been messaging him for a year.
yeah,
He's
awesome.
emailed me back a couple of times throughout that year. But if Biggs Burke is listening, I want you.
That's like kind of like when you're dating for the first time, you're getting those text messages to you're all excited as fuck. It's like when you're getting those emails coming through.
Yeah. And so that's what we've been missing, and that's what like I said, we're fundraising again now, and that's what I would love from this round.
Yeah,
Is to have
awesome.
someone like that on board. Yeah.
And kind of fascinated about the kind of algorithmic side of it in terms of, as you're mentioning, part of the pitch when you're raising the first time was actually you can put some technology behind this to be able to give insight at a micro level to independent artists so they can really understand how to get bang for their buck, even if it's 100 quid. Were you relying on your skills as a kind of an analyst to be able to create these algorithms, or were you bringing people in to be able to help you with those kind of models?
Yeah. So initially, me and my co-founder, I brought on board a guy called Rico Rao, I worked at Carwow with actually. Really, really cool guy, far more technical than me. And so we kind of sat down and wrote some rules essentially. And these
Yes.
were our first algorithms, really simple. And then they functioned, they just about functioned and started to create insight. And so we really did leverage our knowledge of what insights artists would want to
Mm-hmm.
see.
Mm-hmm.
And then quite quickly after raising the money, we brought on board a data scientist and then two engineers too, who really kind of tore it apart and said, actually,
as,
this is the
as,
best way to
as
do it.
any engineer does.
Yeah. Quite rightly, quite rightly. And so that's kind of how the process went. So they were fairly non-technical. And I
Yeah.
think maybe that's an example of what I think entrepreneurs or like business people or people just starting out should do is they
Yeah.
should just do it. Like just have a go and just
Yeah.
speak
Yeah.
to people about it. I think too many people are worried about doing something because it might not be quite right.
Yeah.
You've just got to try it. I'm a
Yeah.
big
Love
advocate of
that.
that.
Yeah. And I suppose speaking about kind of engineers, data scientists, and recruiting on that side of things, how did you find that experience of going out and finding technical talent?
I actually found it okay, and the reason I've heard horror stories, real
Yeah.
horror stories that it's a nightmare, it's expensive, especially because you're hiring people with a really important and valued skill set.
Mm-hmm.
Developers are sought after. But what I did was I found companies that I really liked, and I liked their mission and I liked their product,
Mm-hmm.
and I reached out to the developers that worked for them really on LinkedIn.
Nice.
And fortunately, and I knew what I was looking for. I was looking for people who are young, who were aspirational, who wanted to own something, and were potentially frustrated with, working in a slightly bigger company,
Yeah.
because then we can share those values. And again, a numbers game. Reached out to a number of people, and some of them came back to me. We got in an interview, and they bought into the mission, which was
Awesome.
amazing.
And kind of, I suppose, since you've kind of got the more technical aspect of the business up and running, what was the kind of the next stage for you in terms of what you were looking for Unheard and where you wanted to go to next?
So really, our broad mission is to level the playing field for independent artists. If we look at the music landscape now, there are loads of production tools. You can create a track on your mobile phone now. It's really easy to make music. There are loads of distribution platforms to get your music onto Spotify and Apple Music and
Yep.
Deezer, etc. But when it comes to the marketing landscape, it's fragmented. There's a huge barrier to entry. Either you need a budget and you need to employ an agency like we are on one side of the business, or you need to be a marketer. You need to understand how to use Ads Manager, Submit Hub, blah, 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 the different platforms out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so our mission and our goal is to almost democratize that marketing landscape and
Yeah.
create an ecosystem where artists can use their data. They don't need to be a marketer, but they can use their data to run their social media ads, pitch for playlists, pitch for press, and then also create. We want artists to be able to create virtual worlds that they can sell tickets to and monetize their content. We want artists to be able to mint their artwork and sell an NFT, again, creating that sustainable revenue. And so, that's our goal with the product.
Yeah.
And where we are now is we're an agency that's grown 300% over the last year. We are now a tech platform that's launching in December, which will provide artists with this like a one-stop shop. I hate that phrase, but it is a one-stop shop, like marketing solution. And we want to serve like every single independent artist in the world, to be quite honest with you. And that's our goal.
Just picking up on the every single independent artists, obviously, as you've alluded to, there's a huge volume of independent artists, and as you say, they're growing at a rate of knots. But how do you get in front of what is quite a micro individual? Like, what are the kind of things or tactics you're doing to try and get Unheard in front of as many independent artists as possible?
It's definitely a challenge, and I think if we just talk about that independent artist for a second, if you look at Spotify as a platform, 99% of revenue comes from the 0.1% of artists at the top.
Yeah.
And 97% of revenue on YouTube comes from that top 3%. So there's a big disparity there in terms of where that revenue comes from, which again, I think is a big motivator for us. And then in terms of how we get in front of that 99.9% of artists, there's a number of things we have planned. I don't want to go into all of our little secrets and growth
Yeah,
hacks,
you've got
but
a fundraise coming up.
yeah, exactly. I'll give it all away. Someone will be taking notes and be amazing. But I think like partnerships are really key.
Yeah.
Partnerships are really key. And there are, like I said, there are lots of distribution platforms out there that these independent artists are distributing their music through. And really, for distributors to be able to provide those artists with a good marketing solution is
Mm.
incredibly powerful because they
Yeah.
earn money off the back of that. And it's a nice to have as well. It's like a reward for the artists that are using you. So
Yeah. Yeah.
partnerships is really important, and we know what our cost per acquisition is. So we've done a lot of testing on Google Ads, social media ads, so we
Very good for
understand
your
what our,
upcoming fundraise.
yeah, yeah,
Max
yeah,
out.
exactly,
Love
exactly.
that shit.
So we know what our CPA is going to be, and we
Love
can
it.
extrapolate that through, a paid marketing provision
Yeah.
that we've allocated for social spend, and then also, referrals and sharing. Like
Hmm.
we genuinely, we can reward artists for sharing the app with their peers, and this app, if it delivers what we've said it can do and what we know it can do, then it will change that landscape. And I think people, when there's like a company that really does transform something, I think about Monzo and the golden ticket scheme. Like Monzo
Yeah.
is like obviously a huge kind of pioneering business. I think if the product holds up and it's quality, then people will share it. And we're not
100%.
relying on that, but yeah, that's another
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. No, makes a ton of sense. And just interesting, given obviously working in the music industry, and given obviously start 2019, but obviously had 2020, the COVID year. Was that an enabler for your type of business, or was it kind of having to pivot in slightly ways? Like, how did you navigate that?
So I think for the music industry as a whole, it was incredibly challenging. I think for the
Mm.
live sector in particular, there was no live for so long. But what that meant is that artists, management companies, labels had to focus on digital. They had to focus on new ways in which they could promote their artist or earn revenue through their artist. And we work in the digital space. So for us, it was certainly an enabler, I would say. And it's
Yeah,
definitely contributed to the increase in revenue. And we were all working from home, and we touched upon this before the call. We were all working from home at the time, just kind of in our bedrooms. And actually, that led us to think that we should actually collaborate more, like, and we should
hmm,
get an office space, and we should move. And so we did. We ended up getting an office space in Talliard, which has ultimately allowed us to continue that growth. And now things are opening up again because we've done a pretty good job with artists initially. They're sticking with us, so we've managed to retain those
nice.
clients that we brought in. So for us, it was certainly an enabler, but I think for the music industry as a whole, it was definitely a challenging time. But I think it incentivized or accelerated innovation. Artists need that D2C route, like they really
Yes.
do need direct to consumer route. They need to be
Yeah,
able
yeah,
to
yeah.
monetize, and I think there are some really cool businesses like fan circles, etc., that are popping up and offering artists
Yeah.
those opportunities. So I think it's good.
And just kind of touching on something you mentioned there around the kind of retention piece, like how do you manage that balance between going out and getting new artists into Unheard, whilst also managing and giving good service to everyone that's on the platform or part of the agency?
So I think there's a few things. So we track acquisition metrics and retention metrics.
Yeah.
So we understand if that disparity or the delta is good, and if we're bringing in enough artists, we have total customer targets per month as well. So we kind of know where we need to be and where we need to be tracking. And like something really simple in terms of retention is our newsletter. Like we have a regular
Yeah.
newsletter that goes out monthly, and that enables us to remind customers that we're here who maybe have been dormant for a while. It reminds customers that are active, like what we're doing, and we can share some of the successes that we've achieved. It sounds really simple, but
Sometimes it's just the simple shit that works.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
really simple. And we're encouraging artists to do the same now. Like we're
Yeah.
actually saying to a lot of artists, build that email database again, sell your merch, sell your tickets, upload that audience as a custom audience on
Mm.
Facebook, and build a lookalike around it, because those tools are so powerful and overlooked because of the
Yeah.
development of social media and how quickly
Yeah.
that came about.
And I suppose then, just finally, Alex, looking ahead, as you mentioned, looking to possibly, hopefully, do another funding round. What are the kind of the key next steps that you see for Unheard in terms of growing as a business, growing as a team?
So really, like you said, once we secure this funding, then we'll be in a place where we need to scale the technology quite quickly. So build out the different services that we call information from. So the TikToks, the Snapchats, the Shazams of the world, the Amazon Musics too, building those additional services. And then we're into a marketing phase. So as we get towards kind of Q2, Q3 2022, so next year, that's when we start to really deploy our marketing capital to grow. And we
Hmm.
have some key markets, so English speaking markets, but UK, US, France, Germany, Australia are some key music markets,
Hmm.
as identified in the annual IFPI report. And these are markets we're going after initially. And then we'll be going after some slightly bigger markets, so volume markets like South America, like Asia, etc. So
Yeah.
really, it's tech focused for the first 6 months, iterating and building that product for scale, and then it's about deploying marketing provision.
Awesome. Well, I couldn't wish you any more luck with it. It's been awesome just hearing how Unheard started and kind of where you've got with it. It sounds like there's just so much potential given the kind of growth in independent artists and switching that dial on the kind of 99.9% to 0.1%. So it sounds like you're onto like an awesome mission with that. Look forward to seeing how you guys go in 2022 once you've got your funding in place. So best of luck from our side. And yeah, thanks a mil for sharing the story so far.
Thanks, Kieran. Thanks for having me. Really loved it.